Welcome back, storytellers, to the Storytellers Guild. This is Max. I am resuming my series on writing. The goal of this channel, hopefully, is to build a community of writers and storytellers. The purpose of this series is to draw back the curtain behind a lot of the mystery that exists around writing and really kind of showcase what that looks like for people. So we're making our way through this sort of fanciful, frivolic experience, this detective investigation. And I am going to dive right back in just a second. I want to share a couple of things before I do. The first is that I was in my head a lot, as I always am, about this video in particular, and like the laundry was going, and I was like, my hair doesn't look good, I can't get the lighting right. And there are all these reasons that I didn't want to sit down and do this immediately. And I just wanted to be here to show you and remind you, hopefully one of the biggest sources of inspiration I hope people draw from the series is the awareness that things don't need to be perfect, circumstances don't need to be perfect for you to write. You can just write. It's great. One of the reasons I love it is it's very versatile. So we're going to dive back in. I did some thinking about Duncan and his relationship with his officer, whose name I am blanking on right now because this is only my second time sitting down to it. Quinn. There she is. Quinn. So, like I said, not perfect, right? But I'm wondering about their relationship, and he ended the last episode saying, let's see if we can get lost. And Quinn, as I was thinking about it, and like as the young detective, as the aspiring protector of the law, she's obviously going to be very upset about this because she wants to uphold the law and people's rights. And so we can kind of explore that in a kind of more lighthearted way than I think a lot of those things get explored these days. And obviously those have their time and their value, and we will maybe eventually do that. For now, I want to dive right back in, and we're going to get started. So he says, now, let's see if we can get lost. And she is going to just like react. She's like, what do you mean? So I think she's going to drop her pen and paper. Quinn dropped her pen and paper. Wow, this keyboard. So I, after the last episode, I realized that the keyboard typing was actually quite loud. So I'm trying it on like, I've actually just got like a towel over my desk, and I laid the keyboard on that. And I'm also going to I'm going to move the microphone a little bit and lay that on there as well to provide some insulation from the sort of harder, more sound conductive surfaces. So hopefully this episode is a little better, and if it's not, we will continue to make tweaks. For now, obviously, it's a smaller keyboard than the one I normally use, hopefully because the keystrokes are quieter. So I'm still getting used to that. But I'm going to say Quinn dropped her notepad and paper. And then she's going to splutter. Like, what do you mean you're going to bend the law, right? So this is something that how is she going to say it? She's going with spluttering indignantly. Detective. You can't do that. We are guests. Like, I'm just imagining. So one of the things I think people struggle with is dialogue, and I'll touch on this probably every episode. But I just want to point out that dialogue is natural, and like the way writing works for me, I'm watching a movie in my head that is entertaining, right? And so the idea is that people do stuff that I would want them to do or want to see because it's exciting, it's fun, and it's engaging. So you can't do that. So I'm imagining her saying, wait a minute, you can't do that. We're guests in this man's home, in the Duke's home. And she didn't take a breath. Her face was getting red. We are guests in the Duke's home. Not only that, and I like to use not only that, But we have a professional, and what I'm doing in my head as this, it's nice because I'm not the world's fastest typer. So as this happens, I can sort of expound on it a little bit. And that's one of the great things about Google Docs is you can actually voice to text if you want to, which I will do sometimes for sure if I'm feeling like just sitting around and writing. But it's more helpful, I think, to show the writing process in this case. And so in my head, I'm going, we have a professional obligation to uphold our duty as servants of the people and maintain our professional decorum as officers of the law, right? Something almost exactly like that. And that's what it's sort of forming in my head as I write it out. And so now I have to try to write that down before I forget it. Professional responsibility, serve the people of the empire. I don't know if this is an empire yet. Did we talk about it up here in page 1? And this is something I would do. I would just go back and be like, Noble's Quarter. No, the city has quarters, but it doesn't necessarily have a name yet. Or Mercantile Police, Court Police Brigade. I'm just looking at like pronouns, capital letters that stand out to see if we have something like that on the books. And we don't. So what I'm going to say is serve the people of the queendom, because kingdoms have had their run, and it's fun to do something a little different. Why shouldn't little girls also have, powerful monarchies to look up to? To serve the people of the queendom. Not only that, first one was to serve the presence of the kingdom in our capacity as the protectors of their peace and safety. If you go barging into private quarters that you weren't invited into, you risk undermining everything we stand for. How will they trust us then? How will they trust us then? Last, she stopped for a gulp of air. And I'm just saying, like, we're honored guests. Not only that, you can't do that. So I'm, like, reading back over it, making sure it rings like I want it to. How will they trust us then? And I'll italicize this, too. She stopped for a gulp of air. Duncan, and she's gone off. She's, like, vented. She's, like, kind of out of breath. Detective Watercolour. And I think I'm going to call him that instead of Duncan because it's more colorful. Obviously, that's one of the reasons I chose the name. But also, I think it reinforces this dynamic. And I still haven't decided, which is a problem, if this is from Quinn's perspective or Detective Watercolour's. So maybe even from Quinn's, just because it's going to be more exciting to see everything for the first time through her eyes. She can be our vehicle, kind of, as, viewers into this world. That's a common trick you can use in writing, is giving the audience a new character who is going through these things for the first time as well, so that the newness that the character experiences can also be new for the readers, right? And so that gives you a reason to explain everything, and it gives you a reason to describe things that other sort of more established characters might not even notice anymore, So that may be the direction I go. For now, I'm doing third person omniscient, just kind of like removed from both, and we'll see. Detective Watercolour put a gentle, firm, gloved hand, white gloved. He's very flamboyant, this character. Hand on her shoulder. His mustache twitched excitedly. Ever so slightly. Yeah, so I'm thinking about like I want him to be strong and like knowledgeable and wise, but I also want him to be fun. I want him to like have a twinkle in his eye. The twinkle that was always in his eye, fairly danced brightly. And the idea here is that I'm building the character, and one of the things I wanted to do too, and I'm going to go ahead and do that now while I'm thinking of this, because this is an interaction that we haven't seen yet. Really, is sort of the private interactions between Detective Watercolour and his sort of young officer. So I'm going to come back up here to where they get out of the carriage. He said, "Smell that." No, ma'am. Exactly. No smells appear at all. Corrected the man in his colorful livery. In pastel livery. And that reminds me, I want him to be pastel, pink, and green. In a big hat, round, pastel pink, green uniform with big silver buttons and shining rosy cheeks. He smiled effortlessly, surveyed the crowd for himself. Because it's far enough away now from saying that earlier, like, that I want to make sure that he's not... You know, if you say also, it's like, this person did this person also did this. But if you say, this person did this, and then insert 3 sentences, and then say, this person also did this, it feels disjointed. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the also. Say, surveyed the crowd for himself and stood at attention. And then the man in pastel livery whispered to the young officer. She nodded, as if this were the most... So he's fun. He likes to be a little playful. He doesn't take himself too seriously, I suppose. The young officer, Quinn, does. She nodded as if this were the most important, and she takes herself too seriously, right? And so there's some push-pull that's going to happen. There's some natural internal conflict between the two of them and their operational styles that will eventually create some lovely opportunities for character growth and arc development and things like that. But I just want them to have some rapport, like to just like have some interactions together. She nodded as if the words were the most important thing in the world, and pulled out a pen and paper, notepad, to write it down in. Observe now. Encouraged. The colorful man. Colorfully garbed fellow. And what's he going to say? Observe now. Reflect later. What's the word? I'm trying to think. I'm literally blanking. And this happens when writing too, and you just have to kind of fight through it. Observe now. Reflect later. It's not reflect. I want something different. It's like to calculate, to conject, to... It's like mathematical. It's very like statistical. It's... I know this isn't very exciting to watch, but this is part of the process. And it's an important part of the process to be patient with yourself through, because you will have these too, and that's not a reason to stop writing for the day. You can power through. Observe now. Record. That's what I'm looking for. Record later. And she doesn't. She goes through recording. And they will have a conversation about it. Maybe even now. Correct, he said. I must admit, sometimes these cases can get the better of me. And he's going to admit that he's wrong, which is a very important thing to show him doing early on, because that sort of moral flexibility, that desire to, that willingness to be wrong, there's wisdom in that, right? And it's important to see that he can admit to being wrong early, because he may be wrong later too. And as a detective who investigates, he's often wrong. So he's learned lots of practice. I imagine most of us have. And I think that makes him relatable. Always too excited to dive in and meet everybody. He sighed. And this is an opportunity for character development too. And adjusted his big... Excuse me. Sorry, I just had to cough for a second there. I found out this last winter that I have asthma, so busy living with that. That will happen from time to time during the series. I apologize. But we powered through and adjusted his top hat. This is a moment of reflection, because I want us to see him as not this perfect heroic figure. I want us to see him as a guy who's just trying really hard and doing his best, right? Which I think every character is in their own way. And that's what makes them fun characters. I want to make a whole episode at some point dedicated just to characterization instead of caricatures. So we'll get there. But for now, I want him to give us a little backstory about why he has, a young officer in the first place. This explains why she's there. And I just kind of had the ideas as he was saying it. Always, sometimes these cases get the better of me. Even as I was writing that, I had the realization, the idea that, maybe maybe he had her assigned to him because he was a little reckless, because he was a little bit negligent, nonchalant, really, which is exactly what he's going to admit to being. Always too excited. I'm always too excited to dive in and meet everybody. That nonchalance is why they assigned me to you to me. To straighten me out. Not straighten. Straighten. I don't like straighten. They wanted to... encourage my professionalism. Do things the right way, not just the fun way. No, I wanted to encourage me to do right, not just do good. And we can explore that more in the story too. I'm sensitive of time. We're going to have to wrap it up. We didn't get a lot done this episode, but we've done a lot of foundational work around their relationship. So I feel very satisfied with where we are. I'm going to forge ahead just a little bit and then maybe get us into this room so we can finally move forward with the story itself. Quinn has 2 N's. I don't know why I put 1. And notepad back in hand, Quinn straightened up. And the reason I did it that way, it's a little clunky. So I'm gonna actually change that. I was trying to be different, but it reads sort of too clever. I'm overthinking it. Quinn stooped to pick up her notepad and pen. And even that is symbolic. Like the fact that she's dropped the tools of her job at shock at his behavior. She like his lack of professionalism, his lack of respect for people's private boundaries, his sort of blasé nature about it, literally robbed her of the tools she needs to do her job. So now she's collecting them again, right? Is it working? I suppose we'll have to see. I suppose we'll have to see. Too early to tell yet. Detective. Watercolor. Chuckled. At least I'm headed into the right door. Reaching for another door. At least I'm headed into the right door this time. No. So I'm debating. So what you see me doing here is thinking, like reaching for the door. There were a couple of ways I was playing that out in my head. The first was I watched it and he said, at least I'm finding the right door, and it's not the right door, but he's not doing it on purpose to be wrong or to get lost again. He's just doing it because he's flustered that he got called out. And then the other thing I was thinking about doing was him just saying like, too early to tell yet. Now at least I know which door it is. Which door is it? Right? And then she's gonna open the door for him. And so I like that because I like that better because that kind of sets the tone for the rest of the story, which is what I want. I want this to be about their partnership, and his learning to work with her in that way. So yes, I'm gonna do too early to tell yet, and then we say, at least I know. And this is another fun way of doing language. It's like, at least I know which door. Huh. Officer Quinn? He tilted back his hat and scratched the fluffy white head underneath. Which door was it? Smiled. She like, come on. And opened. Because I want him to be a little bit flustered, but I don't want him to be a joke. You know what I mean? I want him to be very good at his job. So I'll have to be careful not to overdo this. So the young woman smiled and opened the door that May had indicated earlier, not before her departure. Less words, right? Try to use less words. Through it, They passed through it into one of the most beautiful rooms either one of them had ever seen. I'm going to describe this room before I end it today because it's important. Oh, never mind. We're already at 25 minutes. Unfortunately, we're going to have to call it there for today. But I already have an idea. It's like browns and greens and lovely and well decorated and kind of like a weird counterpoint to a lot of the sort of gaudy beauty that we've seen in the rest of the house. And that's going to be important. So we'll pick it up there tomorrow. Have a great rest of your night, day, whenever you are watching this. And don't ever forget, storytellers, that all of our stories are still being written. Talk to you soon. Bye.